Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Today is February the 23rd, 2017. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Right? Let me say this, and I don't say it lightly. We're all living in different worlds. Right? What you see today is just a snapshot of what life is all about. Now, if you're a graybeard, if you're like me and you have gray, right? You remember looking at great fighters, learning the game on the way up, right? As good as Vladimir Klitschko looks right now, there was a time where Vladimir Klitschko lost to Ross Purity. There was a time where he lost to Corey Sanders. Right? There was a time where he lost to Layman Brewster. There was a time where he was a guy who had a lot of skills, but who was green, who was learning how to handle himself. Right? Even now, he doesn't quite go to the body that well. Right? You push the issue, he tries to clinch. He's not a guy who's going to let his hands go on your torso. Right? Even now, he's not a perfect fighter. But the point is, you've actually watched him grow up. I can tell you, I saw Lennox Lewis in a bunch of tough fights. That first Oliver McCall fight, that was a tough fight. The Ray Mercer fight, that was a tough fight. Right? You saw Lewis having tough fights on the way up. The guy who goes through a stretch where he's dominating David Tua, where he's destroying Michael Grant. Right? That's the finished product. You understood that it was a road that had to be traveled to get to that finished product. Now, I look around the heavyweight division today, and I see a lot of young, talented guys. These guys are no different than, let's say, a young Lewis or a young Klitschko, right? I see Joseph Parker. I see Anthony Joshua. I see Deontay Wilder, right? And, for a lot of these guys, it's come the hard way, right? Look at Wilder's record. Wilder's fought a lot of tough guys on the way up. A lot of these guys haven't been handed a lot, right? Joseph Parker, whatever you think of him, right? The guy's already fought Carlos Takam. The guy's already fought Andy Ruiz, right? So I have a lot of respect for these guys. But hear me clearly when I say that the heavyweight division is up for grabs. In other words, as much as I like Deontay Wilder personally, right? And this is a guy who, as heavyweight champion, has drawn a line in the sand against juicers and has said we have to get rid of juicers, people using PEDs from the sport, right? He even sues Alexander Povetkin over it. Right? Understand, this is a heavyweight champion from Alabama. Right? Now, you have a lot of great athletes from that part of the country, but they all go into football. Right? Deontay Wilder insists on fighting in Alabama before his core crowd. Right? This is a guy who not only remembers where he's from, but this is a guy who constantly reminds us of where he's from, right? Because he's taking the state of Alabama with him during his reign as heavyweight champion. So I have the utmost respect for Deontay Wilder. But that doesn't change the fact that Deontay Wilder is still learning the game. That, in my opinion, Deontay Wilder doesn't know what to do if an opponent gets inside on him. Right? That Deontay Wilder is too reliant, far too reliant, on that great long right hand. Right? It's long. I believe a more finished heavyweight, someone who's been around the block a bit more, would know how to defense it just by positioning. Why do I think that Wilder decided not to fight Luis Ortiz? It's because I feel Wilder knows he stood a good chance of losing that fight. I personally would have taken Luis Ortiz over Deontay Wilder. Right? I look around the heavyweight division, I see a bunch of older heavyweights, guys who I feel have been in the game a little bit longer, have been tested, have thought things through a little bit more, are not as hardwired as Deontay Wilder. And I think those guys are viable against him. Right, folks? I'd take David Haye over Deontay Wilder. So, just understanding that even with great records, Wilder's unbeaten. Incredible KO percentage, not just by today's standards, but by historical standards. For all Wilder has accomplished, if a guy comes by, even a guy who looks on film like he should lose to Wilder, if a guy comes by who has, we'll call it, an entrepreneur's mindset. In other words, this guy's been hearing no all of his life and has been beating the odds. Right? This guy's not pushed by some group around him. You know the entrepreneur's mindset. This guy's pushed by his ideas. Right? He's figured out that the status quo is just one set of outcomes. Right? That the people telling him he has no chance or little chance might not themselves know the proper math. Now let's talk about Gerald Washington. I looked at Gerald Washington. I was looking at a tape of him against Eddie Chambers, a guy who made it to the 12th round, against Vladimir Klitschko. Right? Something I'm not sure Anthony Joshua's going to be able to do. Right? So there I was looking at this film and I noticed this guy. And he keeps throwing body shots on Eddie Chambers. Right? Chambers is shorter than him. But Gerald Washington is just persistent. Right? This is a guy who is going to make sure his opponent is slowed down. Right? I was impressed. So I decided to look up the guy's history. Right? He plays football for 1 year. 1 year. In high school in Vallejo, California. Northern California. My neck of the woods. Then he joins the Navy as a helicopter mechanic for 4 years. 4. Right? Those are his college years. He's in the Navy for 4 years. So after those years, when the guy's in his early 20s, when people of his generation, his graduating class, already have degrees and are already going out and first job, whatever, pro career, if you were a football player in high school, college, and you got drafted, what does this guy do? This guy goes to junior college, where he's a major stud at tight end. In 2005, he makes the JC Athletic Bureau All-American First Team. He's a super prep, JUCO 100. Right? He also makes the All-Foothill Conference first team. So, after playing junior college in Rancho Cucamonga, now, I've been to Rancho Cucamonga, not a lot going on there. Right? Here's a guy in his early 20s who only played 1 year of high school football, who decides he's going to go to junior college and he's going to play football. This is after 4 years in the Navy. He ends up getting a scholarship to play football at USC. Now, I'm a Pac-12 guy. I can tell you, getting a football scholarship at USC is no small feat. Here's this guy doing it in his early 20s. So after he's at USC, he shows up at tight end. They tell him that we need help on the defensive line. You know who this guy is. He becomes a defensive lineman. Right? After USC, the guy ends up on NFL practice squads. Right? He's not a starter in the NFL. He's on a practice squad. But interestingly enough, follow the history. There's a strong USC Seattle Seahawk connection, right? Pete Carroll went from SC to Seattle, right? A lot of people know each other. We'll just put it this way. Somebody at SC thought enough of this guy to put in a good word so he ends up on the Seattle Seahawk practice squad. Right? I'll just say this. I looked up this guy's background and I looked at that film of him against Eddie Chambers and I thought about Deontay Wilder's weaknesses. No. I'm not betting against this guy. Right? I believe Gerald Washington is dangerous. I know the world views this as a tune-up fight, and they're thinking in terms of Deontay Wilder against Joshua or whoever, Joseph Parker, whatever, right? Okay, fine. I'm just here to tell you the heavyweight division is wide open. This guy who's 6'6", right? And he's fighting another tall guy. This guy who's a committed body puncher when he wants to be. This guy who is doing things on his own timeline. He's 34. But this is a Walter Mitty, isn't it? This is a guy who is just pursuing opportunities. Stuff that interests him. He's a late comer to the sport of boxing, just like Dominique Brazil is. Right? Gerald Washington's a late comer to the sport of boxing. All I'm saying to you is that this is the kind of guy who plays 1 year of high school football and then ends up with a football scholarship to USC. This is a guy with the discipline to be a member of the Navy for 4 years. Right? He's in great shape, folks. Now, I agree. Washington's not defensively blessed. Keeps his hands low. Looks tailor-made for Deontay Wilder right hand. No doubt that's why they picked him. But are you sure that Wilder is going to be able to handle this guy who's an athlete? If this guy starts landing shots to the body and is still upright at the start of the 4th round, right? Are you sure that this guy, who's beaten the odds at every step of his life, is suddenly going to wilt under the bright lights? This guy who has not depended on media hype or an entourage, right? Are you positive that this guy is going to wilt? as he gets closer and closer to the heavyweight title. The bet I'm recommending in this fight between, let's face it, Deontay Wilder and a relatively unknown guy, is that you not pick a side. Right? I feel somebody gets stopped in this fight. Right? Just as an odds play. In fact, let me dial back what I just said. To get full advantage of the odds, the bet I'm recommending is that you take Gerald Washington to win the heavyweight title, hedged with Wilder by KO. Right? Understand, Wilder got hurt by Eric Molina. Artur Szpilka is right in front of Wilder for several rounds. I know the scorecards are a little bit one-sided. That's a competitive fight until Wilder's last punch. That's a competitive fight. Right? Wilder has a problem, in my opinion, maintaining spacing. Right? Gerald Washington is a guy who, let's face it, even from a football perspective, is an above average athlete. Right? The guy's playing offense. What? You need me to play defense? The guy's playing defense. There's a word for guys like this. Athlete. Right? You have an athlete who's now one fight away from the biggest prize in professional sports, the heavyweight title. I think he's a live underdog. I think Deontay Wilder has done a lot of things. I think his record is better than his current skill set. Right? Public loves knockouts. Knockouts cause amnesia. Right? I want you to track Wilder's last few fights. Right? Poor Chris Arreola didn't look like he was physically prepared for that match. But even Chris Arreola got inside. And what did Wilder do? Right? Wilder, in fact, gets hurt in that fight. Doesn't he? In other words, the fight's that strenuous for him. Right? Now, what happens if you're dealing with a big guy who can get in, land body shots, get out, has a sense of spacing, and is daring Wilder to throw that right hand? Understand, throwing your Sunday punch comes with risks. Because if you throw the punch and you're extended, your opponent has an opportunity to counter you. Right? So I'm going to play the odds here. I'm going to take what the casino is offering here. I like the underdog Gerald Washington to win the fight, hedged with Wilder by KO. Right? The heavyweight division is wide open, folks. Right? You got a lot of guys who are early in their development as professional fighters. Maybe there'll be a day where Wilder's a master inside. Right? Maybe there'll be a day where Wilder can win slow rounds. Right? With boxing proficiency. I don't believe that day is now. So when I see him against a disciplined 4-year vet of the U.S. Navy, who also happens to have played football for the University of Southern California, and who is now an unbeaten contender, who's fought people like Amir Mansour. By the way, I thought Washington lost that fight, but that's another story, right? Let's just say Amir Mansour could get inside better than either of these two guys. Right? A guy who's fought people like Eddie Chambers. Right? I think Gerald Washington is underrated by the public. I like Washington to win. I'll hedge the play with Wilder by KO. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.